We know data science is the sexiest job of the 21st century. But have you wondered what's sexier than data science? It's quite simple. It is data itself. What are data scientists for if we don't have data? Well, we should at least give some credit to data for data science being so sexy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sassy Analytics Insight podcast. This is Priya Dialani, your host for today. Well, data is a hot topic in the business world these days. Everyone wants to talk about the insights and value they can derive from data. There's a good reason for that, though. Data is one of the most valuable resources available to today's marketers, business analysts, publishers, media companies, and many more. But data is only useful if it's of high quality. Bad data is at best inconsequential. Now, in the worst case scenario, if it can lead companies to make even costly mistakes. IBM estimates that bad data cost the US economy $3.1 trillion per year. Now, those costs come from the time employees must spend correcting bad data and errors that cause mistakes with customers as well. So, why should we focus on this aspect? So, today with us, we have Nick Jordan, founder and CEO of Narrative, a leading data streaming platform. Hi, Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Priya?
Thank you so much. I'm doing good too. Great. We would want to start with knowing more about Narrative. So, can you tell us about the company, its services it offers, or any specialization that the company is into?
Sure. So Narrative is a company that's about 5 years old. I founded it largely because I was working with data science teams that were constantly looking for interesting data sets to help improve their models. And then, we were often taking the output of those models and selling that as data itself. And what we found was, both the sourcing and the monetization of data, it can be an incredibly arduous process. And so Narrative is really focused on, taking what historically has been manual and has taken a very long time when it comes to data procurement and automating it and streamlining it through an easy to use software platform.
Sounds quite interesting. Like, thank you for letting our listeners know about Narrative. Now, in the start, I mentioned about good data, bad data, talking about the quality of data. Now, I want to point out one review or a quote. So, in an MIT Sloan Management Review in 2017, in an article, data quality consultant Thomas Redman estimated that correcting data errors and dealing with business problems caused by bad data cost companies around 15 to 25% of their annual revenue on average. Now, that's quite a huge percentage, according to me. Also, in addition, a lack of trust in data on part of corporate executives and business managers is commonly cited among the chief impediments to using business intelligence and analytics tool to improve decision making in organizations. Now, since you spoke about the company, we want to know, taking everything into consideration, with what mission the company was built upon, and if you can also highlight your journey since the inception of the company.
Sure. So, I understand too well the distrust and maybe misuse of data in certain ways. And so, the way that we've approached, a big portion of our philosophy is that the entire data ecosystem should be incredibly transparent. If you look at how data was leveraged historically, it was often through a data broker model, and those data brokers effectively are black boxes in terms of what happens from the time the data is actually sourced until it gets sent to the organization that's ultimately going to use it. And we think that supply chain needs to be much more transparent, and with the transparency comes data quality. If you can really understand who collected it, how it was collected, how, and sort of, if it was aggregated or if anything was done to it along the way, you can really move beyond the question of, is this data correct or not? Now, I will say, other than data that, has something, terrible has happened to it, I like to say that there is no good data or bad data. There's either data that's useful for your particular problem or data that, isn't useful. And so, we tend to think of things as signal versus noise, and noise not really meaning that there's something wrong with the data. It's just not predictive, or it just doesn't have any value for the domain that the user is using it for.
That was quite insightful, Nick, when we're talking about describing data as not good data and bad data, but probably what is useful and what is not useful. If data is complete, there are no gaps in it. Everything that was supposed to be collected was successfully collected. Now, for example, if a customer skipped several questions on a survey, so the data they submitted would not be complete. And if your data is incomplete, you might have trouble gathering accurate insights from it, and accordingly, it might hamper the decision making process as well. So, if someone skips some questions on a survey, it may make the rest of the information they provide very less useful. So, then again, we are coming back to useful data and something which is not at all useful. So, since we're talking about the importance of quality data, why is having good data always a challenge?
Well, I mean, I think if you take the example that you just gave about a survey, people are don't spend their entire day filling out surveys, and I don't think most people want to spend their entire day filling out surveys. And so, to the extent that data collection requires some sort of non-passive behavior, you're always gonna have challenges with that. And so, one of the things that narrative does, and this is a use case we see all the time, is we work with organizations that have data sets that have gaps in them, and they want to fill those gaps, and they want to do it in a way that doesn't require them going out and having conversations with all of their customers. And so the way that works in narrative is they will push their existing data set to us. They'll go into our system and define which gaps they want to fill. So any record that where the respondent did not give their age, we would like to understand the age of the respondent through licensing data from a third party, and they can very precisely fill in those gaps and again know which providers are actually providing the data, so they have some assurances that the data is actually quality and is ultimately going to give them the right answers.
Definitely, I think a lot goes into the backend process of how we can make effective use of the data, and I think narrative is a very classic example of that. And thank you for explaining us how things work at narrative. Since you mentioned that you don't look forward to data or as good data or bad data, and you're particularly more focusing on useful data, so I would like to shift that from like a good data management perspective to useful data management, and why it is crucial for keeping up with the competition and taking advantage of immense opportunities available out there. So, improved data quality leads to better decision making across an organization. That is for sure. And the more high quality data we have, the more confidence we can also have in our decisions. Similarly, on the other hand, unuseful data can decrease risk and also result in consistent improvements in the results as well. So, having said that, why do you think is like historically the best AI and ML models that have come out of organizations that have the best data?
Well, the question almost answers itself. I mean, they have the best data and they have the most data, and so whereas organizations that are not as data rich, tend to spend more of their time focused on how do we come pull in additional data sets that help us answer the questions. The organizations like Google and Facebook and Amazon that are very data rich, they don't have to spend a lot of time and effort sourcing data because they have a ton of it. They can better spend their time figuring out how to squeeze as much of value out of the data that they have. And I think all of those organizations understand that their real differentiator is the data itself. And I think that point is proved by the fact that they often open source their ML and AI models, because they know they're not really giving away the competitive advantage they have, because those models are only effective if you can feed an incredible amount of data into them. And so I think it's an interesting problem for organizations that aren't the size and scope of companies like Google, is how do you compete over time, because Google's advantage, or maybe Amazon's advantage, since they seem to be going into almost every market conceivable, is that they have so much data, and therefore they're going to be a better run organization, and they're really accelerating that advantage that they have. And so I think, organizations that are not of that scale have to figure out, are there ways to democratize in data sets across the smaller organizations, just so they can keep up with the advantage that the larger companies already have.
Absolutely. I would like to pick up the point that you said in the end, that are there any other ways of how they can democratize data and make effective use of the data? So if we go back a decade, probably, I think many organizations began their data science journey by starting center of excellence, hiring the best data scientists they can and focusing their efforts where there is lots of data. In some aspects, this makes good sense too. After all, they don't want to be late to the artificial intelligence or machine learning hype party for that matter. Plus, data scientists also want to show off their latest tools and technologies as well. But is this the best way to deploy the rare resources? And if you consider, for most companies, we think that it can be unlikely. But data science also must be democratized broadly. And if data science is to be truly transformational, everybody must get in on the fun. So, how do you think we can democratize the data science landscape?
Yeah, I mean, data science is interesting because when I think probably the first time I heard the term data science was, a decade or so ago. And at the time I was at Yahoo. And we had a whole team under the banner of Yahoo Research, and I think it's probably what you would describe as a data science function today. Although I don't know that we actually use that term for them. But 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the data science work was really about publishing papers. It was much more of a research science function and a function of academia more so than an applied science. And so I was always really heartened when the data scientists actually started becoming an applied science, when they were sitting arm in arm with an engineering team and actually building sort of productionalized code and models that were actually being used in the real world and not just in a research paper. But to your point, the true data science requires an incredible amount of education and an understanding of math that, frankly goes far beyond, what I'm capable of. And most organizations are not going to be able to find the talent to have sort of a dedicated applied data scientist sitting everywhere. And so the trend that we're seeing is this API-ization of data science. I mean, it used to be that you had to have a PhD in applied math and, really be able to get into the weeds with the statistics and the underlying data. But through both Google and Amazon and other places, we're starting to see a lot of the work that a data scientist had done historically be automated through these APIs, and I think that is only going to continue to go forward. I think after the data science functions are turned into APIs, what you'll see companies that are just starting to build products on top of those APIs, to the point where the average user might not even know there's any data science going on underneath. They just log into their system and they get an answer. But it's all really being powered by the data scientists and ultimately the data that's available to them.
Definitely. Now, to add to what you said, we sometimes ask companies, which would you rather have, a newly minted PhD data scientist or 20 people who can conduct basic analysis in their current jobs? So almost 90% of them opted for the later one. Now, when you talk about this to our experts, now experts recommend to solve this issue, they're recommending developing citizen data scientists. Now, there are plenty of good business intelligence tools and increasingly automated machine learning tools that is making it possible for business analysts to perform quite some sophisticated analysis. Now, for example, Royal Bank of Canada did an exceptional job and has achieved a great success in this scenario. Now, since you were talking about the API-ization of the data science function, so how do you think the democratization of data has been accelerated by the API-ization of the data science function?
Well, I think it just makes it more approachable. I mean, to your point, finding one PhD data scientist is a lot harder than finding folks that are data savvy, but maybe not building their own models. And so it all boils down to just data becoming more approachable and becoming easier. At Narrative, we built a data platform, and we actually have a bunch of customers that sort of fall into the job description of data scientist. But we also have a bunch of customers that fall into the job description of business development executive or people in various marketing functions. And I think the trick to really get broad adoption is to make it easy, not just for someone that's highly technically proficient, but easy for anyone within the enterprise, anyone within the organization that has a problem that they're trying to solve. That's the API-ization, again, sounds technical, right? Like most people don't walk around all day thinking about APIs. But if it's really the first step of actually just embedding data science in the tools that business users use every day. And again, I think there'll be most of them won't even think about all of the math and the data that goes into the products they're using. There'll be products that help them solve their problems and do it in a really elegant and effective way.
Right. I think I agree with you, Nick, that most of the data scientists or organization tend to ignore the APIs of the data science function and how it can actually help in effective decisions making. So now, since the start, we are talking about the importance of a good data. And right now, I just want to point out certain benefits that actually good data quality means. So it increases the accuracy of analytics applications, which can lead to better decision making that can increase your sales. It can also improve internal processes and give organizations a competitive edge over their rivals. And I think further, it can also expand the use of BI dashboards and analytics tools, as well as if analytics data is seen as trustworthy, business users are more likely to rely on it instead of basing decision on gut feelings or on their own spreadsheets, for that matter. Now, I understand that data and having good quality data is really important in terms of modeling and data science modeling. But apart from best data, are there any other attributes that can ensure effective data science models?
Well, I mean, a lot of data science is the tuning of the models based on the data that you have. So, tuning the hyperparameters and all of those things. But, even that, a lot of that's, being automated and being put into the APIs itself. I think one of the biggest challenges we see with the modeling and with the data is just the amount of time that has to go into getting the data and then massaging the data to get it into the correct format. Doing things like feature selection and the hyperparameter tuning. Those things when taken together can take weeks or months in some cases. And I think, we will have truly gotten to, the promise of data science, when, going from a hypothesis about, how a model might be made better or a type of data that might improve a model to testing that hypothesis can be measured in minutes or hours and not days or weeks. Because I feel like at that point, the term data science kind of lives up to its name insofar that, the data scientists can constantly be testing hypotheses and finding things that work and really iterate in a way that will produce, better results quicker.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you go back to a decade, I think the burden of data quality efforts was centered on structured data, which was stored in regional databases, since that was the only dominant technology that was available for managing data. But the nature of data quality problems expanded as big data systems and cloud computing became more prominent increasingly. And data managers also need to focus on the quality of semi structured as well as unstructured data. Now, to include examples, it would be text, internet click stream records, sensor data and network, system application logs, and many much more. So, want to know what are the challenges or the roadblocks that have been companies facing to access signal rich data and how they have been solving that problem, and again in this scenario if narrative has helped companies to overcome these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, data's complicated. that's the the overarching theme of what some of these challenges are. I mean, I like to tell people that it comes in an infinite number of forms. It's when you boil it down, it's just ones and zeros. And so whether the data has structure or no structure or it's semi-structured, it's somewhat complicated. We talk about data as if it's a monolithic asset, as if it's like a widget, but when it's really all of these different things together. And so I think there's a couple things that we do at Narrative to help with that. And we've actually taken some of our cues from how the information on the web has been organized. And so if any of your listeners are old enough to remember what finding web pages looked like before Google, sort of became the dominant search engine, it was pretty bad. You would search for something in a search engine, and the results would be terrible, or you would have to go to someplace like a Yahoo and look at just an index of different web pages they thought you might find interesting. But Google really made search much better, and one of the ways they did that is by effectively applying some semantic information about the pages themselves. And so, if it's an e-commerce website, it might be the product that you're browsing, or its price, or its color, or its size. If it's a sports website, it may be semantic information about the teams that were playing and the score of the game, or when the game was played, or where it was played. And so, one of the things that we've started doing at Narrative is starting to add semantic meaning to the data sets that are used on the platform. And so you might have 10 different companies that are selling data that is ostensibly the same, but it comes in a different format, or it may be measured in a different unit, or it may be collected in a slightly different way. And so if you're a company that would like to buy that data, you have to understand the nuance of all of those things from each of the sellers. And so what we've done is by adding that semantic layer on top of it, we let the buyer say, hey, I'm looking for transactional data for any products that were purchased in an e-commerce setting in the last week, where the purchase price was greater than $10. And it effectively lets the user of the data, the data scientist or the analyst, speak about what they want in a very easy way, and really be protected from the nuance of how the data is actually collected, because our system is sort of tying everything together in a way that almost acts as the Rosetta Stone between the data players.
It was quite insightful, Nick. I guess, yes, there are certain challenges when we're talking about useful data and good data quality management. Also, one such practice that we have come across is that businesses tend to involve business users and with data analysts and data scientists in the entire data quality process to help reduce the number of issues that are created in systems. Business participation can be achieved partly through data governance programs and interactions with data systems who frequently come from different business units. Now, in addition, though, many companies run training programs on useful quality best practices for end users and employees. Still, people lack in efficiency in effectively using the data. Now, a common mantra among data managers is that everyone in an organization is responsible for data quality. So, how do you think the evolution of data science will look like in the coming years with the commoditization of ML models and parameter tuning techniques?
Well, I think we're going to see some amazing. I think that we're just starting to see the acceleration of what data science and modeling can do, and I think to the extent that organizations are bought into a broader data strategy and they're bringing these data scientists into the mix. I like to think that we're very early innings in terms of the things that we can see, and so I think 10 years from now, we'll almost look back on this conversation and it'll sound a little bit silly, because data will just be such a core component, not just of every organization, but of every business unit, every functional area, every team, every project within an organization. is largely going to be driven by the data that the organization has access to. And so with that buy-in from the organization, and then with the maturation of the tools and the science, and then with the access to the data, I think I'm incredibly excited for what the world's going to look like vis-a-vis data in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yes, well, definitely. Even I'm excited to see how the world is going to evolve in terms of data science. But one last question, Nick. Would you like to give any advice or data management tips to our budding entrepreneurs and leaders in the space of data science?
Well, I think I really like the way that you led off the podcast by calling data sexy, because I do think data is sexy. I think sometimes we talk about data, especially folks that are steeped in data all the time, in this very abstract way. I think one of the things that data is almost missing is a brand. Data is sexy, and it should be talked about that way. And I think, to really make sure that it becomes, more ubiquitously understood within an organization, it can no longer be the domain of just the engineers or just the data scientists. And I think a lot of that is messaging. I think, yes, we'll build tools that are easier to use, and we'll build all these other things. But I think for certain folks, data is scary because they don't really understand what it is. They don't really, they think it's, going to replace the job that they do. And so, I think what would behoove everyone, that is in this data universe would be to, make it a little bit more attractive to maybe the non-data practitioners by talking about it in less abstract terms, and sort of talking about it, like you would talk about any other asset that you might have, but do it in a way that effectively sells it internally, as opposed to making it sound like this very scary and very complicated thing.
I agree with you. Yes, definitely. Even we have come across organizations who are really scared of data, and especially with automation coming into picture, many people are scared that their jobs are at risk. So, of course, there's a lot of discussion and heated controversies around this topic. If artificial intelligence or different technologies that are coming into picture are going to replace jobs, but I guess everybody is focusing on more augmentation of the human expertise and skills rather than replacing humans. So with this, we would like to say that, yes, data quality is important, but it's not really a job of a data scientist, or a data scientist should be involved in the entire process of a data quality or data management. With our experience of working with organization, and also after having this discussion with you, it convinces that data science is about people, and more strategically and broadly bringing those people together and ensuring that we are making use of useful data. So guys, just like Nick said, it's not about good data and bad data. It is about which data is useful and which is not, and act on the useful data immediately. Well, thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure having you with us today. I think we have touched on some important aspects with respect to data, since data is everywhere. So thank you for giving such insightful knowledge about how data can be utilized and how narrative is also playing an important role in it.
Thanks for having me, Priya.
Thank you so much. For our listeners, watch this space for more podcasts, and also we are on Spotify and Google Podcasts. Hit up to those websites and listen to our more podcasts. Thank you so much.